welcome Megan to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to have this conversation about maybe a topic that is a bit different to what we've spoken about, well, definitely different to what we've spoken about on the podcast, and maybe something that's not discussed a lot. So we're going to be talking about adult ADHD.
Yes.
Which is a condition we're probably more commonly attached to children. And
little boys.
And boys,
yeah,
yes.
Little crazy boys. That was my interpretation of it.
Anyway. I think you're exactly spot on there. So we'll sort of dive straight into it. Some of the listeners might be thinking they've heard that term ADHD and not really sure what is it, because it's sort of thrown around a bit. In its words, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
I know, I hate it. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It is.
It is. Every little part of that equation, all those terms make it sound like quite a negative thing.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us, what does ADHD feel like for you, and what do you think it is?
For me, ADHD is noisy and it's abrupt and overwhelming and like cloudy, I suppose. When I first started going down the path of thinking that this is probably something I'm experiencing, I couldn't describe it because my interpretation of ADHD was hyperactive, crazy, tiny people who are just off the rails and going nuts. And, you know, unfortunately we would judge parents being like, what is going on with your kid? Like, settle your kid down. But now, taking a step back in hindsight and realising how I'm experiencing it now in adulthood, it is so hard to put a label on it because it is so individual.
Yeah.
And so for me, noisy, cloudy, sensory overload, 1,000 miles a minute forwards, 1,000 miles a minute backwards. It's very roller coaster is probably a good way to describe it,
And do you find that you do have trouble focusing, or is it because of that cloudiness, or
definitely
calming down, or...
It honestly depends on the moment, what's going on. Having kids as well really heightens at times. It's hard. There are lots of words that, if you were to Google ADHD, for example, lots of words that would come up that could be a symptom or a characteristic. A lot that I find is disassociation, sensory overload. They're probably the two most that really resonate. The disassociation is kind of having everything going on around you. Every sense is heightened so much that you just blank off and you are gazing into space because your brain can't figure out what is most important. So instead it just stops and then it'll pick up again, and you've been standing there having a conversation with someone and you have no idea what just happened because you could hear a conversation 20 miles away. You can hear a bird, you can hear the coffee machine going, whatever. And for me, my senses think that that's what needs my attention, as opposed to my friend, my child, my phone, my work, whatever. So the focus on that can be quite difficult to tune in and stay focused on the task at hand or the person or the conversation.
That's a really good description of how that must feel in the moment with a person. Like you said, like when your focus is picking up on all these other things than what should be the primary focus at that moment. I suppose, even though our conversation is about adult ADHD, that can definitely help people put their mindset in how a child would be feeling at school if they're trying to focus on what the teacher's saying, but they can hear all the other kids talking. They can probably hear birds outside.
Absolutely.
The clock ticking maybe.
Yeah. Oh, the clocks. Oh my God. The clocks. That's a big one. Yes. And that is
really?
Clocks. Can't do it. In hotels, I have to turn them off. Lights, everything. It's so like little fickle things that people wouldn't see or even notice are such a huge thing for someone with hyperactivity. But with kids, it's so fantastic now in schooling. They have wobble chairs or fidgets, and all these things that parents think are just plastic are so helpful. Like, I have fidgets. Or at work, I often sit with blue tack in my fingers and just move it around, because that takes away that sensory. So I'll have something in my hand while I'm working, and that's enough to keep that sensory overload stimulated and controlled so I can focus on my work.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's how fidgets work.
Yeah. These little spinny things and the things that you pull and make all these noises are so annoying. They are so annoying. My kids have them. We've got tons of them. But I like the little poppet things or the spinners. Or I've even got one from my physio, which is for hand strength and grip strength, but it's like a little rubber ball. It's called an exerciser. And so it's supposed to do something for your muscles, but for me it takes away that hyperaction to like distract my brain from that need to be fidgety.
So that's so interesting. So you pull all your energy and your focus into the thing that you're fidgeting with in your hand so that your mind can focus at the task.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Even on the phone, if I answer the phone at work, I'll always have something in my hand so that my brain knows that I won't get distracted while I'm on the phone, and I can listen clearly to who I'm talking to and what their needs are and what I need to do with that phone call. Yeah.
This can go in so many different directions where we're at right now with this conversation. We're going to sort of talk about diagnosis and how you came to it, but what you just said then, I'd imagine having this sort of attention. How do you like to refer to it, actually?
I don't really know. I always call it my frontal lobe. It's my frontal lobe. Like, just joke it off, because I don't like the word ADHD. I just think it's negative. It is negative, and the stigma in society is so negative towards it, and I don't see it as a negative side. It's just my brain. It's just who I am, how I operate. So hubby and I, we always just joke about the frontal lobe. And I'll be like, oh, it's a frontal lobe. Or if I'm having conversations with people that know that I have, this superpower, I'm like, oh, it's ADD brain. ADD, the DD brain's working. Like, just now that I'm on the medication, it's so much different. But before, I just was all over the shop. Just a little hurricane.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, as we'll get into, you weren't diagnosed until only recently. We want to talk about where it may have started, but first you must have found it quite difficult then, or have you found it difficult going through adulthood with work and any studies that you may have done, or anything, in adult life when you're meant to be adulting? With this inability to draw your attention into a task and not know what is going on. Yeah. Has that been challenging for you?
Big time. I always wondered why I got bored so easily with work options or workplace. So I've always had multiple jobs, whether I worked full-time and had another job on the side if I was working at a cafe or a restaurant or whatever, or part-time and split up against all these places, because I like to be busy. But then I'm also always exhausted, and I just put it down to I'm a busy mum. I've got 2 kids. I'm working, parenting. Hubby works a lot. I just was always told from GPs, clinicians, everyone, oh, you're just a busy working mum. This is normal. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a busy mum and this is life. But I always wanted to study, but I couldn't focus on. I don't understand how people can sit and study for 8 hours a day and retain that information and go to a assessment or, whatever it might be, and come out of it with something. I just cannot fathom in my brain how people do that, because for me, I can't even read a page of a book without forgetting what I've read, falling asleep, or being bored straight away, because it's not stimulating the part of my brain that needs to be stimulated. So being an adult, I suppose I don't know any difference. So now, looking back, it would have been so helpful, life-changing, years and years and years ago, to be going through what I'm going through now, just in terms of kind of slowing things down and not looking for that next dopamine hit, that next, what can I do on the side, blah, 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 blah. But one of the biggest things with hyperactivity in ADD is people with that will hyper-focus on tasks that they love, that they enjoy. And for me, that's creativity. So art, digital work, virtual content, whatever it might be. And I really love being in a creative sense, in a creative purpose. So I would always paint on the side or I'd be drawing, even kids colouring in books, all that kind of stuff, would just be enough for me to have something that would keep me focused all the time. And then I looked into, studying design and graphic design and all of that, but I just couldn't do it. Even though I loved the topic and I wanted to learn, I just didn't have the ability to sit and actually learn it. With work, I learn on the job. I can't read procedure manuals and watch tutorials and things like that. I can, but I'm not going to absorb any of it. But I will learn by being shown, one-on-one, and then doing it myself. I'll learn that way. But yeah, as an adult, it's definitely been more challenging in ways to be able to consistently get up and do the same thing every day. I need a lot of variety in my life, which drives my husband insane. And my kids. But I always have little projects going on. I'm always upcycling or, doing something, trying to keep my mind busy, because sometimes the day-to-day is mundane and boring. But you need that to pay the bills.
Yeah. I think all of that, what you've said, is a perfect example of why the education system and the current way that we do schooling, in mainstream sort of schooling, doesn't fit for everyone because of the way that they learn. Now I can understand why you were saying before how it's your superpower, because if you find that area of your passion, you can just go hardcore
you go nuts
into that.
Yes.
And so for adults and for children, it would be then finding what their passion is and guiding them through that.
Yeah.
And I suppose an earlier diagnosis for you obviously would have been key, and who knows
what would have happened.
Yeah,
where I would be.
And so do you think that it may have started in childhood?
Absolutely. When I was going through my diagnosis, I had to fill out quite a lengthy questionnaire, and it would ask questions referring to childhood and adulthood. So same question, but, where were you at? And it really got me thinking, because, you just live your life, and it isn't until someone asks you a question or you see it written in front of you where you actually stop and have to think, because, it's a long time ago now. And I even asked my mum or my sister, do you remember anything like this about me? My sister straight away was like, oh, God, yeah. But my mum was like, no, I don't think so. You were always busy. You always had things going on. You always, leave little parts. You always have little things. So they used to call me a magpie, was my childhood nickname, because I would always be grabbing shiny things and collecting stuff and have all these little things. And
little trinkets.
Yeah, pretty much, but just crap, just stuff. But obviously it was me trying to get those little dopamine hits back then. My sister still calls me a hurricane, just always on the go, picking stuff up, putting it down all the time. But childhood, I definitely, probably more so like maybe later primary school to high school, I reckon. I really struggled in high school because I wasn't academic, because I couldn't focus. Looking back now, I struggled with homework and assessments and assignments and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to do, back then, TE, but I couldn't because I couldn't focus. But then the course that I did didn't really interest me. I graduated year 12, which was great, but I only stayed because I didn't know what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. And then the courses that I did weren't things I was interested in, but I knew it would give me something to leave school with. Whereas looking back now, I wish I had really delved in that creative world, the arts, the dance, all of that side of stuff. I had parents who grew up both running their own businesses, working for the man, that kind of thing. That was what I thought you did. So I did the courses that I knew would get me that certificate so I could go and work for the man and, be a number in a corporate company, which I did for 6-7 years before I had kids. And now looking back, I really wish I did.
Yeah, I think now we probably do have opened our eyes a little bit more to opportunities that are out there, and obviously the world is so different now for what kind of career options are available compared to back then.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully now, I think they probably are teachers more trained to be able to notice these things and pick up when a child maybe needs some assistance. And I suppose that's where having a diagnosis is sometimes power, because it's knowledge of what's going on, and then you can work your way through. And also peace of mind to know I'm not crazy.
That's what you've hit the nail on the head. I'd go to the GP and I just feel like I just need my brain to be quiet, and then that was what led me down to the anxiety world, I suppose. After I had my second child, I just was constant in my head. How do I do this with 2 tiny people? And yeah, she just said, I think what you're describing and how you're acting sounds like a bit of postnatal anxiety. And I was like, okay, well, that felt good because it had a label, I suppose, so I could hyperfixate on that and research and figure out what that was and how I could move through that and everything. But now, looking back, it definitely, I don't believe it to have been anxiety. I think it was just...
a misdiagnosis.
Yeah, in a way that, yes, I was having anxiety-ridden moments, as all people do, but day to day, the dopamine hits I wasn't getting anymore because two tiny people consumed my world and I wasn't doing anything for me, which we all, get lost in motherhood really easily. And so I had wished that if I had have had that support and diagnosis years ago, that my experience as a first time and then, second child coming along would have been so much different. And I would have done things so differently, so different.
So after the birth of your first child, were you having any kind of anxiety moments then, or were most of those sort of moments happening after your second?
More after my second. My first was, they're never easy. They're not easy. Kids aren't easy. But my second was a surprise, happy surprise. I fell pregnant with him. Evie had just turned 1. And we were ready to try, but when we were ready to try, I was already pregnant and didn't even know. And so the first time around, I had no morning sickness, so no symptoms, but I'm very in tune with my body, I suppose is probably a part of the superpower. I know when things aren't right. And I just had this feeling one day, I think I'm pregnant. So I went to Coles and got a pregnancy test and then found out in the Coles toilet that I was pregnant. Oh, it was so funny.
You're the second person on here who found out with a Coles pregnancy.
Yeah. I just think there's something going on. And then, boom, straight away. But with my second, I was so, at the time, I know now, I couldn't, everything made me feel sick. I had headaches and I was just like, I just don't feel great. So I went to the doctor. Well, my hubby's like, this isn't normal. We've got to go to the doctor. I was like, okay. So I went in and he was waiting in the waiting room. I said to the doctor, this is what's going on, rah, 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 rah. And she's like, it sounds like you've got chronic fatigue. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. She's like, we'll do all these blood tests and everything and we'll just take a pregnancy test. And I laughed at it because I had the Marina in. And I was like, I can't be pregnant. She's like, well, it can happen. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then did a pregnancy test straight away. And she's like, you're pregnant. I said, what? What do you mean?
Hang on. You've lost me.
Yeah.
Wait, so when did the Coles thing happen?
So the Coles thing...
Before or after that? Or first?
That was first baby. Sorry, second baby was Marina baby.
Oh, okay. So first baby was the Coles pregnancy test. Oh my God, so
I've jumped a year, sorry.
The way that you finding out is no straightforward.
No.
That's so funny. So then the second one, you were getting really nauseous and really lethargic, which happens obviously in the first trimester. You feel like a zombie.
Absolutely, which I didn't experience in the first one. I felt
great. Okay, and so you went to the doctors because you're like, whoa, this energy.
I'm dying.
But you had a Marina in.
I did.
Which is, for the listeners, it's a contraception.
Yeah. And I didn't want to go on the pill because I'd had bad experiences on the pill. I wasn't breastfeeding, so I wasn't on a mini pill or anything like that. So the Marina was a great option, obviously. Take it out, pretty much your body, from my experience, your body goes back to normal and you can start trying. But I'd been experiencing for probably maybe 6 months all this lower back pain, and I was like, maybe it's just I'd had a cesarean with Evie, so I thought maybe my core's just really not great and I need to work on my back and blah, 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 blah at the gym. But looking back now, when they did an ultrasound, the Marina had slipped and my body was trying to get rid of it.
Oh, you were trying to expel.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's how I felt pregnant with the Marina because it wasn't doing its job. Oh my God. I know.
Okay, so tell me about that moment then, in detail. So your doctor's like, here, go do a test.
Yeah, so I did the little pee in the cup. She popped the little dippy sticky thing in. We were chatting about all this other stuff and we were kind of not really paying attention to it because she knew I had the Marina. We knew that this wasn't probably not going to be it. But she looked and she's like, oh, you're pregnant. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And she's like, yeah, you're pregnant. And I was like, but how? And she's like, oh, there is a small percent. And I was like, of course, I'm the small percent. Of course.
And she's probably like, oh, well, I don't have to do any more diagnosing.
Yeah, she's like, that was easy. What cancel this blood work. Don't worry about it.
We'll change the blood work to something else.
Something else. Yeah, and so I went into the waiting room. I was like, oh, I'll just go grab my hubby. And he's like, have you got cancer?
Oh, my God.
Are you dying? And I was like, no, I'm pregnant. And he just went, what the fuck? And Evie's not even walking. And I was like, we're going to have 2 kids under 2 for like, I think there's 4 months, 3 months. So what's that, 20 months between them, 21 months? And that, I think, was what led me down the anxious world of 2 kids under 2, how am I going to do this? And it wasn't like once Oscar came along, like he's such an easy baby and things were good. It wasn't, they weren't, it's always challenging. They weren't hard kids, but the smallest of tasks were hard. Which baby do I get out of the car first when I go to Coles? Which kid do I put in the trolley do I leave the baby in the car while I put the toddler in the pram? Do I leave the pram and do I do the trolley? Do I carry, like I couldn't in my brain, and now knowing with the ADHD how it works, because I'm very regimented and routine like in my brain, I couldn't work out the routine with the tiny humans of where do they fit. So I would obviously get overwhelmed, and then those feelings would kind of carry on through the day quite mildly, but I don't think I left the house by myself with both kids in tow till Oscar was probably about 3 or 4 months to go do the grocery shopping, or I'd wait till the weekends and Ryan would come with me, or he would go and do the shopping after he finished work and things like that. We didn't have click and collect back then.
Oh, yeah,
so
that would have been so good.
Yeah, oh my God, amazing.
Shopping straight to the
life-changing. Couldn't even go get a drive-through coffee back then.
Oh, yeah, things are so much easier.
I know, right? So just those little moments kind of became overwhelming. At the time, I was working for myself with an online business, which was growing and huge, and that was very demanding as well. And I really wanted to give that attention, but also like, mate, they're my kids. They need me to survive, and vice versa. So I was really torn between both, and that was when the disassociating stuff really started to happen. I would kind of just completely blank out to everything. It's almost like having, in my experience, like a fit or a seizure where your brain just can't compute, so you just stop completely and then rewire and start again and kind of try to move forward with a clearer thought pattern. But for me, it just was never clear. So I just stop and stop and stop, and never really be able to pick up and think clearly through that.
So you sort of felt throughout the day you weren't going anywhere in a way?
Yeah, kind of. Trying to figure out what the next move was forward, making sure that, everyone was safe, fed, all of that jazz. And it just got a bit too much sometimes, so I just didn't go. I'd go to the gym, put the kids into the creche, because I'd meet a friend there and she would help me get the kids out of the car. If I had someone with me, I was fine. But just trying to get out of the house was an overwhelming process. So, once the kids got that little bit older, I think once Oscar was walking, and Evie was nearly 3 by that point, and she was very independent, very helpful, so she was really good. She would help me, or, she'd listen, and I'm going to get Oscar out of the car, you stay here, and then Mummy will come and get you, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Being able to
have a conversation.
Yeah, pretty much, with a tiny person who kind of understood what was going on. But when I would go to town and things like that, I'd park as far away from anything as possible, so I wasn't sensory overloaded by cars and trolleys and noises and at the traffic lights, and all of that stuff just blows your mind. So,
wow, that's interesting.
I'd park at the jetty to walk to Woolworths.
Oh, so real far away.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, to be honest, it sounds like, because I've only got one, so I've been thought of having two sounds, very full on. I think any of those sort of daily tasks would be challenging for a lot of people, and that's why we need to have that sort of support around mums,
100%.
because, it would stop you from going out or doing any daily tasks or living your life.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, for you to have that sensory overload. I imagine you would have a lot of sensory overload in the house.
There's a lot going on. And then you've got all the like TV shows
I was
in the
gonna
background.
say, like, Twirly Woo.
Oh my God. What is it? The Giggle and Hoot. All of that. It was a lot. And my like mantra in my head is like, this too shall pass. Like, this day will pass. This is like, it's going to be fine. Yeah. Just go have a cup of tea. You'll be okay.
Did you ever feel like any depressive states?
No,
through this?
I've never. There became a time maybe about 18 months ago to 2 years ago where I thought maybe I am depressed. But I couldn't explain why I thought that. I think it was just because I was going through what I thought was this anxiety diagnosis that couldn't fit into that mold of anxiety. And then motherhood, humans, work, all of that. I was like, maybe I am. Like, I don't know, am I? But I never felt sad or, you know, the typical symptoms of a depressive person. I didn't feel like that, but because I couldn't figure out what was going on, I just thought maybe I am. I don't know.
So it sounds like it was obviously quite challenging to get a diagnosis for you. Sort of roughly how many years are we talking now before you actually got a diagnosis?
So I started, my youngest is nearly 8, is he?
I love it. Someone asked me this morning, and what's your son's birthday? And I was like,
I don't know.
oh my God.
I know.
And then I started having like a mini panic attack because I was like, no, I can't think.
And then you go, we get it all the time. I love it. He will be 8. So I reckon maybe when he started kindy, so maybe 4 or 5 years ago,
Okay.
I started to really think, I don't think that this is anxiety. And at the time, I didn't want to go down any sort of medication route. I really did a holistic approach to everything. I was deep belly breathing. I was seeing a life coach. I was, working out, not excessively, but I was active and walking and going to the gym, doing classes, Pilates, yoga, trying to meditate. Meditating is the hardest thing when you've got ADHD.
Yeah, that's interesting because you would think that maybe that would be a tool to help with calmness, but how does that work for you?
You can't. My brain doesn't stop. I've been highly recommended to go and try yin yoga, so holding poses, deep breaths, really slow movements. And I was like, this sounds perfect. And it was torture. Because the whole time in my head, I'm like, are we moving on yet? What am I cooking for dinner? When am I going to Coles? It just didn't stop. And then I'm having this internal dialogue with myself, which is very common within ADHD as well, of myself telling myself to shut up, stop talking, stop thinking. You need to be in the zone. You need to be in the moment. You need to let go. You need to breathe. You need to focus on this. And then my brain's telling that to shut up. But this goes on all the time. And I had so many conversations with people, just asking out of curiosity, do you have conversations with your thoughts? And they look at you like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, that's not okay. But
it's your way of trying to control or...
I don't know. It's really hard to explain. Like for example, knowing I was seeing you this week, in my brain the last few days, I've been having conversations with you that we've not had, that probably won't even happen. And I'm answering the questions I think you're going to tell me.
Yeah.
But then sometimes if I've had this conversation in my head with someone and then I see them, I'll start talking about what I've been thinking about in my head and they're like, what are you talking about?
That was in rehearsal.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And I thought that was anxiety because it's this constant state of like doomsday or worry, but I wasn't worried. I was just chatting because it just doesn't stop. So
There's something that you do in if you do acting class Emma, where you do these tasks, these little activities that you're talking about, where you kind of, if you have a scene, you practice these thoughts and feelings in different ways that you would respond to the person in that moment, so that when you come and do the scene, you've had all that rehearsals already in you and you don't have to think about it anymore, you just respond. Yeah. And it's exactly what you've done. So you've just been rehearsing.
My whole life.
Yeah. You're rehearsing for everything, every event.
Oh my gosh, for people I don't even know or interactions I might have at a cafe.
But I imagine that would be quite exhausting.
It is exhausting. And that was the drawing point where I went to my GP, who I've been seeing for years, and she's fantastic. And I'd done all the holistic stuff that we had talked about. I said, I think I need something to just turn the noise down. And she said, okay, well, we can get you started on a healthcare plan. You can see a psychologist and they'll give you the tools to be able to quieten the noise. We also started with a small dosage of an anxiety medication. So I started doing that and things felt good. I didn't notice a huge change, but I was on a really low dose. Mm-hmm. So I didn't, for me, I like to understand what it is, that's what I'm consuming and how is it actually going to work? What's it actually doing to my brain pattern? So we started on something low. I started seeing the psychologist. She was nice. I didn't really feel like I gelled with her, I suppose. But obviously that's why there were so many. It's the same with anyone. If you don't gel with your hairdresser, you change hairdresser kind of thing.
I think if you get the right psychologist or psychiatrist or counsellor, whatever form of person you're seeing straight up, you're very lucky.
100%. The amount of money and time I've spent seeing other people is a lot. But the hard thing as well is that it's such a saturated market with people so desperate for help that, you know, you are on wait lists for a long time. And sometimes that time passes so quickly that you're like, oh my God, it's my time to go. And then the overwhelm and the anxiety of actually dealing with it got a bit much at some point, so I would cancel appointments. So I'd be like, no, I'm fine. I'm feeling really good. Like, things are good. Give it a month and you're back on the wait list because you've missed that appointment and things like that. So it probably took maybe 3 psychs before I found someone who I didn't gel with completely, but her approach was very different and she kind of taught me these little just words, and the way that she would describe things really resonated with my thought pattern. And I didn't necessarily like her, but I liked how I felt after I saw her. So I was going maybe every 6 to 8 weeks. Not as frequent as I wanted, but it was what worked for my schedule. And one day we were chatting and she was asking me lots of questions. My daughter is we butt heads a lot. We're the same person. And so having a mirror image of yourself is really confronting, especially when they're a tiny little person who's going through hormonal changes and all of that fun stuff. And I was talking with her one day and she brought up a topic of, have you ever had her assessed for ADD or ADHD? And I was kind of like, oh, my child? Like, she's a lot, but not, because...
So she picked up on your
on
child
my daughter
first.
Just because of how I was explaining her characteristics. She prompted that conversation and I was like, oh, I've never really thought about it. She's not hyperactive. And she's like, no, it doesn't always mean energy outbursts and
bounce your thoughts.
No, I said, she's the complete opposite. I said, but she doesn't shut up and her brain's 1,000 miles a minute and da-da-da-da, and she's so, she's just off with the fairies. We call her the faff queen. She's, the queen of faff, baby. You're faffing around. Because she just, floats and is a little hurricane. And then the more that the psych and I coerced about this, she's like, oh, she's just like you. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I am exactly like that.
You're like, I'm the faff queen.
I am the faff. She gets it from me. Shit, she gets it from me. But yeah, and it kind of sat with me for a while and I didn't go to my next session with her because I kind of was really thinking about what she said. Just that off-the-cuff fly-away comment really stuck, and I started to do a lot of research about ADHD in children, especially little girls, because girls just fly under the radar, and Evie's very smart, she's very academic and doesn't struggle at school, and so I didn't think that.
So is that why they fly under the radar? Because they're not, does a boy ADHD tend to be more disruptive in the classroom or something? Or why?
I would say yes and no. It honestly depends on the child and how they are, but in my observations of my daughter, she is like me in her brain, 1,000 miles a minute. And when things don't go to plan, she really struggles to, come back from that. And if she's really interested in a topic, she's gung-ho and on the computer researching, and which is fantastic. But when it's not something she's, when it comes to sport and soccer, and she is not. She's off with the fairies in the soccer pitch.
That's not her jam.
No, she's not there for it. But the more that I researched about it in children, the more I found that I was ticking the boxes more than her. And so I sent a link to it must have, obviously the algorithm doing what it does. I was constantly Googling on my phone, so all these videos would come up through my social media, Facebook and Instagram, of all these videos about ADHD, and I was like, oh, and I kind of sit and watch and be like, oh yeah, I can relate to that, rah, 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 and so do more research and kind of really listen to podcasts and, you know, articles and things like that, and I kind of flick things to my hubby all the time, like, what are your thoughts on this? Do you see any sort of, you know, resemblance between this article and me? And he's like, oh, everything. That's you to a T. If I could write you down, that's that.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, well, if you're seeing that, like, I've spent a lot of my life with this guy, so he knows what's going on. Sent it to my sister, and she's like, did you write this? I was like, okay. So that's 2 for 2. So I thought I might just go to the GP
and quite hardcore 2 for 2.
like the real people who are going to be real honest. And then one of my girlfriends who were very much the same, I kind of flipped it to her and I was like, what do you reckon? And she's like, oh, babes, that's us. And I'm like, yeah, I think so too. So I kind of summarised that in my phone, made a double appointment with my GP, and poor love, she didn't know what she was in for that day. And I was like, you know, what's going on, Megs? I think I've got ADHD. And the other part of me as well is because I am hyper aware of what's going on within me, I hate going to the GP because I think that they think I'm a hypochondriac. Because I think I have anxiety. I think this is going on.
Yeah, I've done my research and this is me.
Here's the thesis I've prepared on myself for you to recommend where I go now. But she's fantastic, and she's like, okay, so why do you think you have ADHD? And we were having a laugh, and I whipped out my phone, and I've got this list, and she's like, oh, okay. She's like, okay. And we read through everything, and she said, okay, well, I think you have ADD. And I was like, nah, man. She's like, you are not hyperactive. I said, I know.
Oh, so there's a difference.
Yes, big time. So ADD, attention deficit disorder, is your typical, wrong wording, I'm still learning wording, I suppose. ADD is more outbursts of rage, anger, frustration, irritability, moments where your brain can't, like it's like a block, and the only way you can move through that is however your body responds to that movement. ADHD is the same in ways, but it's the way that your brain transmits information. You might have to delve deeper into this, don't you?
Yeah, because I know there was also originally it was always ADD, and then they changed it to ADHD or like added in a thing.
Yes.
And also with the way of diagnosis, which all goes down to like your DSM, it changes constantly. They're always updating it with it, looking at symptoms. So keep going with what you're saying, and we'll try and provide a bit of extra information online for people
definitely.
when it comes to it.
Yeah, my main ones were the disassociating, sensory overload, constantly fidgeting. You've probably noticed I move around quite a bit. I'm chopping and changing all the time. Yeah, just lots of little things that don't sound like much. You would have a conversation with your friends and they're probably like, oh, I do that all the time. But when you're listing it and it's happening all day, every day, that's something that needs attention. So my GP was fantastic. She sent me through a referral to a psychiatrist, which in my mind I was like, oh my God, the loony bin, which is horrible because that's that social stigma again. But I wasn't aware of the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and obviously massively different.
So the psychiatrist can prescribe medication.
Absolutely.
Psychologist is talking you and giving you tools to be able to
move
work
through what you're going through. Yeah. And they both work like hand in hand, have been amazing for me in different ways that work together as well. But the psychiatrist was life-changing. We just had a Skype session for the first appointment and she just chatted, asked me questions, nothing out of the ordinary, but someone who's got no other perception of you other than your name, your date of birth and why you're there. And she just asked me little things about, how do you live your life through the day? What do you, and how do you feel when lots of things are going on in one place? Do you kind of stop, kind of blank off for a little bit, for a moment, or can you move through it easily? And I was like, oh my God, no, everything is just too much and I just have to shut it all down. She asked me questions about going to the supermarket. How do you feel about being in big crowds, big places? And I just said, I just feel like I'm just overloaded with so much information that my brain cannot compute what is important. Just little things like what's your house like? Is your pantry full of plastic sorting Tupperware, but you've got little piles of stuff everywhere? And I was like, oh yeah. But I just thought that was normal. But she said, can you start a task and finish it within the same day? I said, oh, well, if it's something I really want to do, absolutely. She's like, but if it's cleaning? I'm like, oh, God, no. Or, something that's not of interest to me, I'll leave that there for months.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's not got my attention, so why would I give it to it? Even things like sweeping up the floor, I would sweep everything into a pile and then leave the pile there. And my husband's like, it's not hard to get the dustpan and just dustpan that, and then it's done. You're finished. I'm like, yeah, but I've done that part. I've swept it, and then I'll come back to that. I'm just going to go
in
miss
5 months' time.
Literally, he'll come home from work and there's these little piles. Horrible. But in my brain, I'm going to come back to that. I'll come back to that because something else has caught my attention. Mm-hmm. And I think now, looking back, when my dad used to call me a magpie, it makes total sense because I'm like, oh, shiny thing. What's over there? That looks fun. That task is better. But I thought I was like multitasking. Nah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So the psych was just such a breath of fresh air to know that I wasn't going crazy and that these quirks and characteristics of me were labelled as ADHD.
And shared by other people.
Absolutely. And she just said at the end of it, she's like, Meg, I think you live with ADHD and it looks like you have your whole life. And I was like, oh my God.
So she was able to pretty much diagnose straight away?
Pretty much straight away.
So how did that feel for you?
Oh, like a weight just lifted off my shoulders. I didn't cry or anything after from like relief. I just remember thinking, I knew that I wasn't an anxious person. I knew I had anxious moments, but I knew that something else wasn't quite right, mechanically up there. Something wasn't right. I could see how my sister, my friends, my husband operate, and I just wasn't there with them kind of thing. They were all on diesel and I'm like on the real cheap unleaded. But just constantly... But I just make a joke of it. I'm like, oh, I'm just fat. I just faff. I'm just doing what I do. Like, this is who I am. But with time, I needed to know that there was a better option for me with the help of clinical professionals. And so after she gave me that diagnosis, she sent me all this massive paperwork to fill out. I had to go have full blood work done, heart check, liver, everything, because we had agreed that I wanted to try medication to see what my life would look like with that. Usually I do take a more holistic route with things. I like to exercise and, move through all of that, but...
You'd done all that?
I'd done all that. I'd done all that with, yes, it did change, but I couldn't sustain that level of holistic stuff with my life where it is now. My kids have sports. I work 4 days a week,
And those holistic things you can do still with medications as well.
Absolutely.
But you probably wouldn't have to do that full extent.
Yeah. So once I filled out all the paperwork, did all the blood work, got everything back, it was probably about a 3-week period, maybe in between, which wasn't great. Was great, wasn't, because you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and it's the system at the moment, that's the next time you can get in.
So did you just really want to start?
I just really wanted to move forward. Yeah, I did want to start. I wanted to know how this would be now. Of course, I started researching stimulants, holistic views, what can I do, what can't I do, that kind of stuff. Went down that rabbit hole, which was good. It helped put my mind at ease because I really, as much as the information she gave me was fantastic, it still wasn't enough for me. So I needed to get my own research and do all of that. Yeah, once I had that second follow-up, we went through everything. I was prescribed a stimulant and just started on a very, very small dose, and then every 5 days would increase that by 5 milligrams, breakfast, lunchtime, and then 5 days. So it took about, I think maybe 5 weeks until I was on my level. That feels good. Mm-hmm. And so for now, there are some, on the weekends, if I don't have anything planned, I don't take my second dose through the day. Mm-hmm. I take it in the mornings just to, get out of bed and the usual stuff and make sure that my brain is attentive and switched on and focused for what the day is going to bring. But on the weekends, I try not to have that second dose just because I don't really need it.
Yep.
I'm at home with the kids and with hubby.
And that's pretty common for parents with kids as well. They
Absolutely.
might, school holidays, they might take a break or weekends.
Yeah, and I like the idea of having that break for my gut health and everything as well. I don't, as much as it's so great for my brain, what's the ripple effect going to be like in the future? And I know it's something that I will probably need for the entirety of my existence probably, but what do I need to do to supplement the rest of my body going through this medication process?
Perfect.
Yeah, so having those breaks have been really good. Work days, if I know that I've got a full-on day, sometimes I'll take an additional dose in the afternoon. I don't really like to do it because it does ripple into the evening and then I'm wired at midnight and...
Yeah. So because you've said there that it's a stimulant, I suppose people often think, hang on a second, stimulant means... maybe they think of like caffeine. It makes you want to go. In people who are being medicated for ADHD, it's trying to help them to actually focus and move through the day.
Yes.
As opposed to if somebody doesn't have ADHD and takes it, then obviously you're going to get a different effect.
Yeah.
But one of the spin-offs is that if you take the dose too late in the evening, then it can impact your sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's been a few times, especially in the beginning, where I was trying to, figure out what felt good. I took my midday dose maybe an hour later than normal, and that ruined me. I was up till 1, 2 o'clock. So I knew then that I needed to start earlier in the day to be able to get through the day and then go to sleep and sleep soundly. But the difference between taking it and 15 minutes can be, for me, not a great time. So I've got lots of alarms in my phone. Lots of alarms.
Don't miss it.
Don't miss it. It's good. Everyone who I work with, they know that if the alarm goes off, they're like, Meg, if I'm not there. And by now I can kind of tell when I need to have it, but for the most part, if it wasn't for the alarms, I'd be screwed. It's been such a life-changing experience now being medicated because, as you said, it just stops all the noise, that noise that I'd constantly been complaining about to everyone around. It just doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes I still get into that sensory overload, but it's only when there is a lot going on. I've got the kids nagging me. We're in a supermarket. There's a lot around, and I'm just like, I just need you to stop for a second. And now the kids know. I just say, Mum needs a brain break. Can we just stop?
And do you take your fidgets into the shopping centre?
No.
Would that work in that situation?
Not really? I don't think so. I have a little kind of system in my brain where as I'm driving to supermarkets or wherever we need to go, I kind of decompress in my brain what's probably going to occur and then just focus on my breathing, the task at hand, make sure that I'm not distracted by... If I see a friend or someone I know, I'm just off with the fairies again straight after and we'll just walk out and forget everything all the time. So I really try to go to the supermarket and everything when I know people won't be there that I know.
You're like, don't look at me, don't look at me.
I'm not being rude, I'm on a mission. Please don't distract my brain. Yeah, I hate going to the supermarket anyway, but that's just another level of it. But I just really try and pre-compute for my own safety and sanity, I suppose, what's going to happen and what's going to occur so I can move through that without feeling... I don't have any outward bursts when things like that happen. I just kind of stop.
It becomes unproductive.
Yeah, and just almost go into like a zombie-like state because I'm trying to figure out what the task is. Even at home, if I get distracted, I'll stand there and be like, what is it I'm doing? Why did I walk into this room? What is around me that might prompt my thought process of, oh, you've come in here to tidy up or pick up this, or you're looking for this, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I have to go back to the start where I started that thought process and sit and think. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, but because I've obviously been distracted by something that's going to give me a dopamine hit, that my brain's like, phew, look at that.
So do you feel like the medication has been life-changing?
Hugely so. And the comments I've had from friends, husband, workplace has just confirmed that this has been a smart choice for me. I was a little worried in the beginning about it because The experience, I've never taken recreational drugs or anything like that before, but I knew that this particular stimulant that I'm on is something that people want for this party effect. And I was like, oh God, what's it going to do to me? And then knowing now when I take it that I feel normal, I'm like, oh, and people, I can understand why people would want it. But for me, it's just, I don't know, it's really hard to explain how, I don't know how it works. It just does.
Yeah.
And for me, it has opened up so much in my personal life to be able to think about studying, think about offsetting things and having my own business and actually being able to focus on that. Whereas before the thought of it was so overwhelming. I was like, oh, I'll just work for the man for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, the medication does definitely bring its own stigma with it. On top of the condition having its own stigma, it just creates more challenges and barriers, I think, for people to be able to get the help that they probably need and that they want. This kind of moves me to the next question, which is, what do you wish that you knew before, or what do you want other people to know about ADHD in adults or children?
Yeah, I think not to be scared of it. These days, I believe a lot more people like myself are talking about it more openly, and, you know, like with every topic we're moving through the current day, it's nothing anymore. It's just, it is what it is. Hi, I'm Megan and I have ADHD. Yep. I'm a mum of 2 kids. Like, it's just nothing. So I wish that there had have been someone like me, for me, 20 years ago. I wish that back when I was at school that there was more support from my parents. Now, looking back at how much I did struggle, I would have benefited from something like this. I just now know with my own children that just to be a little bit more on top of their little quirks. Just see how often these things are happening. What is upsetting your child frequently? What is maybe sensory overloading them? Where are you when things like this happen? How do they react in that moment? And is that reaction happening multiple times? If you go to the same sort of situation, how do they react? And does that happen every time you go there? Does your child fixate on something, a topic, a book, a character, whatever, and everything else just doesn't exist? You know, they're not bad things, but it's just something to be aware of and kind of take note over time. I'd say it's more prevalent in school age, where you start to really see how your child is within a classroom around 20 other kids. The teachers, in my experience, have so far with my kids at school have been so on the ball, so fantastic with things like this. And my daughter especially, who I probably will go down the track of having her assessed, diagnosed. The teacher has brought a few things to my attention this year especially, so she's in year 4 now, of topics that they have been focusing on at school. And like, Evie is really into this. Like, she is loving this topic. She's been so focused. She's like, please let her know that we're so proud of her. So things like that, I'm like, okay, well, this is something she's interested in, but everything else that she's doing, she's just flying under the radar. Not really great, not bad, but just. Mm-hmm. So little moments like that have made me more aware in my parenting to just take a step back and kind of observe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I can only be like that when I'm in a sound mind as well. If I'm in sensory overload and they're doing stuff, I'm just off the rails.
Yeah.
But if things are smooth sailing for me, it gives me that more awareness of what's going on in front of me, whereas before they'd be in front of me doing all of this stuff and I'm listening to the clock tick. You know? So I wish, and having conversations with my mum about all of this, she now says, oh yeah, you were like that all the time, but we just thought that you were busy. You were just a little girl who was busy doing everything. Had so many little things on all the time.
And I suppose the thing is that there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like there's nothing wrong. It's just, I suppose, to help you achieve your potential
100%.
or really optimise what you can do. And I suppose that's maybe the approach would you be looking at with parenting is just helping your child reach their potential.
Yeah, thrive in what they are interested in, and then not sweating the small stuff. Reports, I don't really care. Are you a good human? Are you kind to people? And are you loving what you do? That's all I care about. But knowing when I need to pull back from parenting as well and kind of just embrace what they're doing in the moment that they love and not worry about the homework, the reading, yes, that's important, but also I need to create a good human that's going to be able to thrive and function as a human when they're not living under my roof. So what tools can I teach them to be able to do that? Just small things of how I've been able to live my life day to day and then instill that in my kids and teach them little moments. You know, when I need to have my brain break, my kids know that they can go have brain breaks too. My son's like, I need alone time. And off he goes. And that's it. And we just say, like, Oscar's having his alone time. Just leave him alone. Don't pester him. My daughter's the same. She's like, I just want to go read my books in my room. Off you go. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what's going to soothe your brain is bad. Of course not. But then there are other times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to set a timer now. You've got 15 minutes for your brain break, and then we've got to do our homework. And once we've done our homework, then you can go back to your books. But I know right now you need to quiet your noise. So let's do that, and then you'll be able to read. Because if I get home from school, I'm like, right, reading and this and this and this, they're going to just have that zombie mode that disassociates straight away. From my experience of what I'm dealing with in my house, we definitely have those moments of blank face, of just nothing. So I kind of look at that and say, okay, well, right now is not the time. Let's soothe, stop, and then we'll move forward with the tasks, just like I do for myself.
That's such fantastic advice as well. Like, I know you're not giving advice to other people, but I think they can take so much from that, because also it's something that you have learned and experienced, and now that's what you're sharing. It's sort of not anything I'd really thought. I mean, we haven't reached that point yet because my son's only 18 months, so he's not going into his registry. He's pulling all the pots and pans out. But yes, and how you can help them to take that brain break, because it's so hard for us to put our minds into their minds and know what is even going on inside their little brains.
100%. I think it's my kids at their school, they focus a lot on health and well-being and mindfulness, and these moments where it's okay to just be you in that moment and the world continues around you. So I really try to, I'm not Gandhi. Like, the house is not functioning like this all the time, let me tell you. But for the most part, I do my best for them to know that it is okay to remove yourself from a situation that isn't feeling good. Whether that's their brain is overloaded, there are kids at school that they're not having a good time with, maybe there's a bit of, character building. Call it that.
Well done.
Yeah. But I just try to tell the kid, my two especially, and their friends that come around all the time, I'm like, you don't have to be cool with everyone. You can be cool and walk away. Let's just, don't be a dick. Kindness is what happens. You need to just do what's best for you and your brain in that time. And if you don't want to be around those people, just go. It is getting harder, though, as my daughter gets older, because she's trying to make those social connections and, the hierarchy, and girls are next level difficult in that world. So far, my experience has been anyway. But trying to make her aware of what her values are and her morals as a person, as Evie, what she can do in that moment and what she can control. That's kind of what I bring it back to within myself, is what can I control in this moment? And right now it's pausing, breathing, moving through, and then restart. And I probably do that maybe 2-3 times a day, depending. Yeah. And it's nothing, like, I'm not sitting in a corner like this for hours. It's 2 seconds, nothing, but enough to, as quickly as you blink your eyes is as quickly as I've done it in my head, kind of thing. And that's tools that I've been taught from the psychiatrists and the psychologists, moving through those moments of overwhelm, anxiety, overload. Those small triggers that really aren't triggering, it's just the environment that you're in that is creating a triggering effect, I suppose.
So thank you for sharing your story and your experience with all of this. And if anybody would like to reach out or connect with you, where would they be able to find you?
Probably my socials, which is Megan Callegari Designs. I kind of channel my hyperactivity focus into creativity, social media, digital, virtual content, that kind of thing. So that's probably the best place. And I'm more than happy to discuss. Like I've said, though, this is my personal experience and everyone is so different. But I know with a few other adult females that I've connected with, we all kind of overlap in a lot of similar things, which has been really reassuring to me to know that not only am I not alone, but if I'm having a moment, I have safe people that I can go to and just be like, and kind of, ask questions. Some are more ahead than me in their journey. Some are just starting from conversations we've had together. So it's nice to have that kind of village, I suppose, in a way, to support me in my questions. And that has definitely been through social media as well.
Beautiful. I'll add links to that in the show notes and on our social media because Callegari is challenging.
Oh my gosh, I know. Calamari? How do you say that? Yeah.
It's lovely, that's nice name. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time,
You're
Megan.
welcome. Thanks for having me.